14 billion euros simply did not exist. In the fading weeks of 2003, the world watched in stunned disbelief as a single, crudely forged document brought down a global dairy empire, evaporating the life savings of thousands. This was not a sophisticated algorithmic heist or a subtle market manipulation, but a brazen deception executed with a basic office scanner, a bottle of correction fluid, and an unprecedented level of corporate audacity. The architect of this colossal illusion was Calisto Tanzi, who transformed a small, family-run cold meat and dairy business in Italy into Parmalat, a multinational powerhouse. Throughout the 1980s and 1990s, the company aggressively expanded, fueled by an insatiable appetite for acquisitions. To the outside world, this growth appeared to be the natural result of brilliant entrepreneurship and a pioneering method for producing ultra-high temperature milk that could sit on shelves for months. Behind the facade of continuous expansion lay a desperate reality of hemorrhaging cash. Tanzi's ambitions extended far beyond dairy, leading him to acquire a sprawling network of unprofitable ventures, including a major European tourism agency and the Parma Association Football Club. These vanity projects drained the corporate treasury, creating a massive, ever-expanding financial void that threatened to consume the entire conglomerate if left unchecked by legitimate revenue streams. To mask this catastrophic bleeding, the executive team turned to creative accounting, a deceptive practice where financial information is manipulated to exploit loopholes and project a false image of corporate health. Instead of admitting their losses, the leadership actively fabricated immense volumes of fictitious revenue. They engaged in dissecting complex financial realities and replacing them with a meticulously crafted fantasy, ensuring that the balance sheets always reflected robust, uninterrupted profitability. The sheer scale of this deception required the silent complicity of the global financial apparatus. International banks, hungry for the lucrative fees generated by the company's continuous debt issuance, readily facilitated the flow of capital without questioning the underlying numbers. This willful blindness created an environment where glaring discrepancies were ignored, allowing a financially terminal corporation to borrow billions of euros on the open market as if it were a blue-chip investment. At the heart of the concealment was a labyrinthine network of offshore shell companies, corporate entities that exist only on paper without active business operations or significant assets. The most infamous of these was Epicurum and later Parmalat, a subsidiary conveniently domiciled in the Cayman Islands. By routing transactions through these opaque jurisdictions, the architects of the fraud could easily hide massive liabilities and invent assets out of thin air. The illusion of overwhelming liquidity distorted the broader European debt markets. Because the dairy giant reported billions in cash reserves, its corporate bonds were considered incredibly safe, trading at premium prices and finding their way into the conservative portfolios of countless institutional and retail investors. The market priced the risk based entirely on a hallucination, creating a dangerous bubble of misplaced confidence that extended far beyond the borders of Italy. The mechanics of the fraud relied heavily on securitization, a financial process where various types of debt are pooled together and sold to investors as interest-bearing bonds, known as asset-backed securities. The company essentially packaged its own fabricated receivables, which was money supposedly owed to them by fake customers, and sold these toxic, worthless assets to international banks. This generated real cash in the short term, but exponentially compounded the hidden debt load. When the time came to pay the interest on these massive loans, the executives simply borrowed more money, orchestrating a classic Ponzi-style rollover mechanism. To satisfy the auditors who occasionally asked for proof of the company's vast wealth, Chief Financial Officer Fausto Tana and his team resorted to elementary forgery. They literally scanned legitimate bank letterheads, altered the numbers to show billions in deposits, and fed the fake documents into the auditing machine. A culture of absolute loyalty and supreme arrogance permeated the executive suite, insulating the perpetrators from the moral weight of their actions. Tanzi operated as an unquestioned patriarch, demanding total obedience from a tight-knit circle of trusted lieutenants who viewed themselves as untouchable masters of the financial universe. They rationalized their crimes as temporary measures, arrogant in their belief that the next major acquisition would magically generate enough real cash to fill the phantom hole. The meticulously constructed facade finally began to crack in late 2003, triggered by an inexplicably missed payment. Despite reporting a massive cash reserve of nearly 4 billion euros, the company suddenly defaulted on a relatively minor 150 million euro bond obligation. This glaring contradiction set off immediate alarm bells across the financial sector, prompting a sudden, intense scrutiny of the impenetrable offshore accounts that had long been taken for granted. The sudden crisis exposed a catastrophic failure of due diligence. The comprehensive appraisal of a business undertaken by a prospective buyer or investor to establish its assets and liabilities. For over a decade, rating agencies, international auditors, and powerful regulatory bodies had fundamentally failed to verify the most basic financial claims made by the corporation. They had accepted photocopied letters and convoluted offshore structures as absolute gospel, completely abandoning their duty as financial watchdogs. The fatal blow landed when auditors finally bypassed the executive suite and directly contacted Bank of America to verify the existence of the Cayman Islands account. The bank's response was swift and devastating, stating that the Parmalat account, supposedly holding 3.9 billion euros in cash and marketable securities, did not exist. The document proving its existence was a crude forgery, and the vast wealth underpinning the entire multinational empire was nothing more than a phantom. Panic immediately ripped through the global markets as the horrifying reality of the situation became public. The company's stock price went into a catastrophic freefall, wiping out billions of euros in market capitalization in a matter of hours. The sudden evaporation of perceived wealth sent shockwaves through the European financial system, forcing a brutal reevaluation of corporate transparency and shattering investor confidence across the continent. In December 2003, the inevitable collapse culminated in what was rapidly dubbed Europe's Enron, leading to the largest bankruptcy in European history. The Italian government was forced to intervene with emergency decrees to save the core industrial operations and prevent a total economic meltdown in the agricultural sector. Law enforcement agencies launched massive raids, seizing thousands of documents and moving swiftly to detain the architects of the unprecedented financial disaster. In a desperate final act of concealment, executives frantically attempted to destroy the evidence of their decade-long conspiracy. As investigators closed in, members of the finance department were ordered to smash computers with hammers and shred mountains of incriminating internal correspondence. But the trail of digital and paper evidence was too vast, and the crude, desperate attempts to erase history only provided prosecutors with further proof of criminal intent. The human cost of the accounting fraud was immediate and devastating, extending far beyond the trading floors of Milan and London. Thousands of dairy farmers across Italy, who had delivered milk to the company for generations, suddenly found themselves unpaid and facing financial ruin. Over 100,000 retail investors, many of whom had entrusted their life savings to what they believed was a rock-solid national champion, were left holding worthless paper. As forensic accountants began dissecting the wreckage, they uncovered a staggering array of deceptive tricks designed to artificially inflate revenue. The investigation revealed elaborate schemes involving double billing, where the same shipment of milk would be invoiced multiple times to different shell companies, creating a continuous loop of fake sales. They even discovered recorded sales of hundreds of thousands of tons of powdered milk to a Cuban state-owned company that never actually occurred. The autopsy of the corporate structure highlighted the severe dangers of family-controlled boards operating without independent oversight. Despite being a publicly traded entity, Parmalat was run like a personal fiefdom, with Tanzi packing the board of directors with family members and compliant allies. This total absence of corporate governance allowed the executive team to bypass internal controls, silence dissenting voices, and orchestrate the massive fraud with complete impunity. The fallout triggered a wave of high-stakes litigation as the bankruptcy administrators sought to recover billions from the international banks that had enabled the deception. Citigroup, Morgan Stanley, and Bank of America faced massive lawsuits, accused of structuring the very financial instruments that concealed the debt while extracting exorbitant fees. These legal battles dragged on for years, resulting in hundreds of millions of euros in settlements and exposing the deep complicity of Wall Street. The sheer magnitude of the scandal forced a radical overhaul of European corporate law and financial regulation. Governments scrambled to close the regulatory loopholes that had allowed offshore entities to be used as financial black holes, demanding greater transparency in corporate reporting. The disaster catalyzed a fundamental shift in how auditors were rotated and regulated, ending the era where a single accounting firm could comfortably sign off on a company's books for decades without question. During the criminal trials, the defense strategies offered a chilling glimpse into the minds of the perpetrators. Tanzi attempted to portray himself as a visionary entrepreneur who was merely out of his depth, blaming his financial officers for the specific mechanics of the deception. However, testimony revealed a deeply entrenched culture of complicity, where the drive to maintain power and prestige completely overrode any sense of ethical obligation to shareholders or employees. The sophisticated illusion was ultimately sustained by a continuous, desperate need for new capital. The company engaged in complex currency swaps and derivatives trading not to hedge risk, but to generate immediate cash flow to cover the interest on their hidden liabilities. Every new financial instrument, every new bond issuance, was just another layer of spackle applied over a rapidly expanding structural fissure, guaranteeing that the eventual implosion would be catastrophic. Justice for the masterminds of the fraud was severe and unprecedented in Italian corporate history. Calisto Tanzi was stripped of his honors and ultimately sentenced to 18 years in prison for fraudulent bankruptcy and criminal association. Fausto Tana, the architect of the forged documents, also received a lengthy sentence, marking a definitive end to their reign and sending a stark warning to corporate executives across the continent about the consequences of systemic deception. Despite the convictions and the regulatory reforms, the scars left by the collapse remained deeply embedded in the public consciousness. For the pensioners who lost their retirements and the small business owners who lost their livelihoods, the legal victories offered little tangible comfort. The scandal fundamentally fractured the trust between the Italian public and their corporate institutions, leaving a lingering cynicism about the true nature of wealth and the integrity of the financial system. The legacy of the dairy giant's downfall serves as a grim testament to the destructive power of unchecked corporate greed. It remains a haunting reminder that behind the polished veneer of multinational success, billions of dollars in debt can be hidden by a few willing accomplices and a culture of silence. Ultimately, the illusion of an empire was shattered not by a brilliant forensic investigation, but by the undeniable, devastating truth that a scanned piece of paper cannot manufacture reality.